In May of 1945, an Austrian schoolteacher walked into an American command post carrying a leather satchel and a 2-page list. She did not ask for food. She did not ask for protection. She asked for 38 children to have books. The general did not ask about the books. He asked whether the classroom could be heated. That question changed everything. The town had been passed over by the front less than a month earlier. The main street still carried tank marks. Several roofs were open to the weather. The church clock had stopped at 4:17, though no one could agree whether a shell had killed it or whether the mechanism had simply run down. The schoolhouse somehow was still standing. Its windows were cracked but usable. The desks were scratched but intact. The blackboards were dusty but unbroken. Every book was gone. Some had been removed by retreating officials. Some had been burned. Some had vanished into private homes when families began tearing apart public buildings for anything useful. For this retelling, call the teacher Anna Keller. Anna had taught in that school for 16 years. She had watched the curriculum narrow, harden, and become something she barely recognized. She had learned when to repeat the required words, when to redirect a lesson, and when silence was the only safe form of disagreement. By 1945, she had 38 names written in a notebook. Children between 7 and 15. Most had missed entire seasons of school. Several could no longer read at the level they had reached before the war. Nearly half had lost a father. 6 had lost both parents. Anna believed reopening the school would not repair those losses, but it might stop the losses from becoming permanent. At the first American checkpoint, she spoke in careful English learned from old grammar exercises and radio broadcasts. She asked whether the occupation authority had a process for requesting school materials. The corporal on duty stared at her, then at the satchel. He told her there was no process he knew of. Anna asked who would know. A lieutenant was called, then a captain, then a major from civil affairs, who explained that schools would eventually receive supplies through a formal education program once offices, records, and distribution channels had been established. How long? Anna asked. The major hesitated. Several weeks, possibly longer. Anna thanked him. Then she asked whether anyone in the building could authorize something sooner. The major should have sent her home. Instead, he looked at the 2-page list in her hands and made one more call. 2 hours after arriving at the checkpoint, Anna was led into a map room where an American Corps commander was reviewing bridge reports, fuel allocations, and road clearance schedules. He was a blunt, tired man in his late 50s. For this retelling, call him General Robert Hale. Anna began explaining the missing books. Hale stopped her. How many children? 38. What ages? 7 to 15. Does the building have heat? The stove works, she said. We have almost no fuel. Only then did he ask what she planned to teach first. Reading, Anna said. Arithmetic, then geography. Why geography? Anna tightened both hands around the satchel. Because they have been told for years that the world is smaller than it is. That answer changed the room. Hale asked how many of the oldest children had lost a parent. Most of them. He looked down at the operational map in front of him. Roads, depots, bridges, arrows. Everything a military staff needed to move men and machines across a broken country. Then he looked back at the teacher. What do you need exactly? Anna opened the satchel. She had expected refusal. She had also prepared for the moment after refusal. Her list was organized by age and subject. Basic readers, arithmetic books, slates for the youngest children, chalk, copy paper, pencils, 2 wall maps, 1 atlas for every 4 students if possible, a teacher's reference book, ink. At the top she had marked the items without which the school could not open. Hale read both pages without speaking. Then he handed them to his logistics officer. Find out what exists within truck range. The officer glanced at the list. Priority? Hale looked at Anna. Immediate. For the next 45 minutes, Anna sat on a wooden bench outside the map room. Staff officers passed carrying folders and field telephones. A military policeman asked whether she was lost. A clerk offered her coffee, then apologized when he remembered there was none left in the pot. Anna had no written promise, no signed order, only a general's words spoken across a map table. And she knew enough about governments to understand how little that could mean once she left the building. Then the logistics officer returned. A depot 22 miles away held crates recovered from closed schools across the district. The inventory included primers, arithmetic texts, dictionaries, atlases, chalk, and teaching charts. Enough for Anna's school, probably enough for 3 schools. But the material had been sealed pending review by an education office that did not yet exist in that region. The officer estimated formal release would take 4 to 6 weeks after the office opened. Hale asked one question. Are the crates physically there? Yes. Can they be loaded today? Yes. Then why are we discussing an office that does not exist? The officer explained the authorization rules. Hale listened, then he tapped Anna's list with one finger. Document this as temporary emergency release of recovered civilian educational property. Put my name on it. If the education office objects when it finally arrives, it can send the objection to me. The officer nodded. Hale added, and load fuel. Anna looked up. He had not forgotten the stove the officer had. The truck was loaded that afternoon, not with a symbolic box of books for a photograph. With crates. Heavy, mismatched, dust-covered crates stamped with the names of schools that no longer had roofs. The soldiers sorting them used Anna's list as a picking order. They found reading primers for 3 age groups. Arithmetic books with pages missing but enough copies to share. 12 atlases, a rolled wall map, boxes of chalk, bundles of pencils, ink bottles wrapped in paper. The logistics officer added blank ledger sheets after realizing they could be cut into writing paper. Then he requisitioned enough coal and wood briquettes to heat one classroom for roughly 5 weeks. It was not charity. It was logistics applied to a different kind of front. That night, Anna returned to the school and cleaned the largest classroom by lamplight. She did not know whether the truck would come, so she prepared as though it would. She swept broken plaster from the corners. She tested the stove. She wrote the date on the blackboard, then erased it because she was afraid of promising a day she could not deliver. Before dawn, she arranged 38 desks. At 8 in the morning, no truck appeared. At 9, still nothing. By 10, 3 children had come to the gate because they had heard a rumor that the school might reopen. Anna sent them home and told them to return when the bell rang. At 10:23, the sound reached her first. A truck engine climbing the hill. Anna stepped into the doorway. An American 2.5-ton truck turned onto the street with a canvas-covered load and 2 soldiers in the cab. She did not wave. She did not move. She simply watched until the truck stopped directly in front of the school. One of the soldiers climbed down, checked the address, and said, "Books?" Anna nodded. The soldier pulled back the canvas. There were more crates than she had imagined. For the next hour, they carried them into the school. Primers, arithmetic texts, maps, chalk, paper, pencils. A box of children's stories that had not appeared on her list. Then came the fuel. The younger soldier pointed toward the stove and said, "The general said the books don't matter if the children freeze." Anna turned away before he could see her face. The school reopened 3 days later. 38 children arrived. The youngest sat near the stove. The oldest sat along the rear wall, their shoulders already shaped by work, hunger, and funerals. Anna began with reading, not speeches, not politics, a sentence written in chalk, then another. The children sounded out the words together, unevenly at first, then louder. For arithmetic, she used ration figures because numbers were already part of their lives. For geography, she unrolled the map across the front wall. Several borders had changed. Others were about to change again. Anna did not begin by telling them where their country stood. She began by showing them how much of the world existed beyond it. The American command moved on. The education office eventually arrived. Forms were created, inventories were reviewed. Someone questioned the emergency release. The paperwork found its way through channels, acquired signatures, and disappeared into a file. But by then, the children had already been in school for weeks. That was the part bureaucracy could never reverse. Anna taught in that building for another 22 years. Across those years, hundreds of children passed through the same classroom. The first crates were repaired, recovered, and shared until newer books finally replaced them. The wall map stayed up long after its borders were outdated because Anna believed the students should remember what had once been presented as permanent. Near retirement, she was asked what she remembered most about the general who released the supplies. Not his rank. Not the order. Not even the truck. She remembered the first question. Could the classroom be heated? Because anyone could approve books. Only someone thinking about the whole problem would remember that children also needed to stay warm enough to read them. In a ruined country, the school did not reopen because a system was ready. It reopened because one teacher arrived with a list, and one commander understood that rebuilding begins where the children sit.